Today, we're opening up an investigative file. We're diving deep into a really complex dispute that started out small, over personal belongings, and then just spiraled out of control into a full-blown legal war. We've got a trove of documents to go through, legal filings, private text messages, and sworn declarations. So, let's piece this all together and see what the case file really tells us.
All right, so here's our game plan for making sense of this tangled web. First, we'll look at the initial fight over property, what kicked this all off. Then, we'll see how it just exploded into a nasty war of words. After that, we'll examine how the legal system and law enforcement got dragged into it. And finally, we'll unpack the backgrounds of the key people involved, based on what's in the documents.
And this is where it all begins, this apartment building on Mercer Island, Washington. According to the court documents, a personal living arrangement here went south, and it went south fast. You could say this is pretty much ground zero, the place where the fuse was lit for a conflict that would quickly go from being a private issue to a very public legal battle.
At the very heart of this thing, you've got two completely different stories colliding. On one side, you have Dustin Jolly, who alleges that his personal property and his vehicle were stolen. But on the other side, Reanna Pepper Fox argues in her declarations that he was never a tenant at all, but a guest who she had to evict because of his alleged intravenous drug use. Two totally conflicting narratives.
So, let's dig into that first part. How did a simple fight over stuff, over physical items, become the foundation for this entire, messy legal battle? Let's break it down. According to legal filings from both sides, this is what the initial fight was all about. And as you can see, it's a mix of valuable and deeply personal things. You've got furniture, a vehicle, cash, electronics, but then you have something as emotionally charged as a small urn holding the ashes of Reanna Fox's murdered son, Jason. Both of them are claiming they have the right to these items.
Now, this right here, this is the moment you see the whole thing shift. This is an excerpt from a formal demand letter. We are way past personal arguments at this point. This is the language of law. You can see it has deadlines, it lists specific statutes, and it carries the very clear threat of taking this through all legal and law enforcement channels. The game has changed.
And you might think legal letters would cool things down, but no. From there, the conflict just explodes into this incredibly raw and personal war of words. And we can see just how intense it got because the emails and text messages, they were later filed with the court.
In this email, which was submitted as evidence, Reanna Fox confronts Dustin Jolly head-on. She's not just disagreeing with him, she's completely dismissing his version of events, saying his entire perspective is tainted by an alleged drug addiction and that his reality is, in her words, entirely manufactured.
And Jolly's response, also from the court file, signals another major turning point. He just refuses to engage with the accusations. Instead, he completely reframes the situation. He's basically saying, we're done talking. This isn't a negotiation. It's about legal accountability, and that from now on, the documented record will do the talking through his lawyer.
And right here, in these text message exchanges pulled straight from the case file, you can see the real-world results of that communication breakdown. They're trying to arrange a simple pickup of belongings, but it just falls apart. One person says, today isn't a good day. The other's insisting, I really need to get some important stuff. It's just total collapse. And this is where things get incredibly painful. The entire dispute becomes tangled up with the profound, unresolved trauma of the 2020 murder of Reanna Fox's son, Jason. This text message, which was included in the filings, just shows how every little thing in this conflict is now being seen through the lens of that horrible tragedy. It adds this incredibly raw and emotional layer to absolutely everything.
As you can imagine, a battle this personal and this intense didn't stay private for very long. It escalated, and it started pulling in law enforcement and the courts. And in doing that, it started to put the systems themselves to the test. This timeline, which we've put together from Jolly's formal complaints, really lays out what he describes as a series of institutional failures. It starts with him reporting his vehicle stolen, but he claims he never even got a case number. Then, after he finds the vehicle himself, he alleges the Washington State Patrol showed up, but then refused to help him recover it. The timeline also notes that protection orders filed against him were eventually thrown out by a judge.
And make no mistake, the stakes here get incredibly high. One of the main allegations in the documents is the fraudulent transfer of a vehicle title. Now, as you can see here, under Washington state law, that is not a minor issue. It's a Class B felony. We're talking about a serious crime that could lead to some very severe penalties, including a decade in prison.
So to really understand the full context here, the case file kind of forces us to look at the histories of the two people at the center of this storm. The documents actually include an extensive investigative report that digs into their pasts.
The investigative report that's included in the file spends a lot of time on Reanna Fox's background. It points to this number, 251. That's the number of public records the report says are associated with her name, stretching back nearly 2 decades. And that same report goes on to claim this is the number of possible aliases used by Fox over the years. Some are simple variations like Pepper Fox, while others are more abstract, like my altered ego. This table, which summarizes information found in the exhibits of the criminal complaint, lists some of the prior convictions documented in the file. They range from a felony conviction for terroristic threats in Minnesota all the way to multiple felony convictions right here in Washington for things like forgery and identity theft.
But it is absolutely critical to say this again. The backdrop to this entire ugly conflict is the immense and unresolved trauma surrounding the murder of Fox's son Jason. His death isn't a footnote here. It is a constant, powerful presence throughout these documents. It's referenced by both of them in their messages as a source of profound grief, as a justification for their actions, and sometimes even as a weapon in their arguments. And so, after sifting through this entire collection of documents, with its clashing stories, its deeply personal attacks, and its serious allegations of systemic failure, we're left with a really big, challenging question. When a conflict spirals this far out of control, where does the accountability truly lie? Is it all on the individuals at the center of the storm, or does some of it rest with the very systems that are supposed to provide resolution and justice in the first place?